Now, we want to turn our attention to LIV Golf, and as we speak, NBA legend Charles Barkley is among those teeing it up alongside Donald Trump, Dustin Johnson and Bryson DeChambeau at the LIV Golf Invitational Series at Bedminster, which is owned by Donald Trump. Barkley is an 11-time All-Star. He is US sports' most high-profile analyst, and he has been flirting with the idea of joining the Greg Norman-led and Saudi Arabian-backed LIV Golf Tour to discuss why LIV are so keen to get him on board and how he has built his profile in American media. I'm joined by Ryan Farmer-Jones, editor emeritus of Slam magazine. Evening, Ryan.
Nathan, how are you?
I'm very well. To give some context then for Charles Barkley and I guess his level of fame in America, as an analyst, just how big a deal is he?
Well, as an analyst, he is, I mean, certainly one of the 2 or 3 biggest faces, I think, of for NBA analysts and announcers in the U.S. You know, he comes off occasionally a bit buffoonish. You know, he sometimes sort of acknowledges he doesn't really like the modern game and, you know, doesn't always pay as much attention maybe to some of the current players as he probably could. But he's very entertaining, always has been. He was entertaining as a player and certainly as an analyst and a studio host. You know, I think it's probably easy for a lot of people to forget, or if they're young enough, they just don't know that he was a phenomenal player in the 1980s and 90s in Philadelphia and Phoenix. You know, beat out Michael Jordan for an MVP award one year. So, you know, his basketball sort of bona fides are unquestioned, but he can come off a bit silly sometimes as an announcer, but certainly a guy who's again, playing resume and understanding of the game is up there with anyone.
Best player to never win a championship?
He's on the list, certainly. Yeah, he's on a very short list, no question.
So this story about LIV that is developed, I wasn't quite sure how serious it was, and I guess we're still in a scenario where nobody quite knows where LIV are going with this thing. They've certainly received quite a bit of stick from golf watchers about their coverage so far in terms of the analysis team and their lack of experience covering golf. They brought David Feherty in, which shows the way that they maybe want to go. Charles Barkley's always, I felt, been a figure of fun in golf. He turns up at sort of match play events and pro-ams and puts on a bit of a show. Right. Is this a real thing where he could throw in one of the most high-profile jobs in his own sport to move to golf?
It's a good question. You know, I'm not probably the biggest golf fan that you'll ever have on as a guest. You know, and obviously I've paid attention to this whole LIV situation, and it's you know, for obvious reasons, pretty gross on certain levels. Not that it's necessarily a particularly worse thing than the PGA, I guess. But, yeah, you know, Barkley's whole thing, I think, for years has been kind of, you know, he doesn't tend to get caught up in what other people think. You know, he's going to do stuff that he wants to do. He's going to take opportunities he wants to do. He's going to say what he wants. Is a pretty beloved guy by people who know him and have encountered him. But in the case of something like this, I think, yeah, if he decides that the money's good enough, you know, I mean, he's got I don't know what his net worth is, but he certainly should have millions and millions and millions of dollars in the bank. But he still does, you know, silly credit card commercials in addition to, you know, his studio gig. And so he shouldn't be hurting for the cash, but I think he'll probably do it anyway if he feels like it's something he'd have fun with and the money's good.
I might play a clip of Charles Barkley for anyone wondering what type of pundit he is. This will give you a bit of a flavour of some of his work on the award-winning Inside the NBA programme. Here's Barkley talking about what constitutes a true champion.
Listen, man, I don't even want to hear. I'm so sick of you guys making excuses for these dudes.
We're making excuses.
No, don't tell me. Well, then don't tell me you're a great player if they can slow you down. Thank you, Shaq. Tell them.
Come on,
man. Don't tell me you're a great player. I mean, all these guys can play, but please don't tell me you're a great player and you're averaging 20. Come on now. I don't think I ever played in the playoffs and averaged 20.
Here we go. Is Kevin Durant a great player?
He is.
And he's been stifled by Boston.
And
I was going to go there.
And let me tell you something. I don't want to badmouth the dude, but see, you guys always talk about that championship stuff. I try to tell y'all, all these bus riders, they don't mean nothing to me. If you ain't driving the bus, don't walk around talking about you're a champion. If you riding the bus, I don't want to hear it. Come on, Shaq, tell them. All these guys walk around with these championship rings. Hey, y'all bus riders. But let me tell you something. When you the bus driver and you got all that pressure where you have to play well or you're going to get the blame, that's a different animal.
It's a different animal. But I think also Kevin Durant's not on the bus. He's just not on the bus.
Yeah, no, but what has happened when he was driving the bus?
Well, he's never just.
No, what was happening when he was driving the bus?
He lost in the finals.
Yeah, okay, he did. And then when he was in Oklahoma City again.
But he was driving. You don't think he was the bus driver in Golden State?
No, I do not.
You don't think he was the best player on that team?
No, I do not.
Wow, I do.
Well, you can say that, but I
thought he was the best player.
You don't join no 73-win team and talking about you.
But he was the best player.
No, he got MVP. He wasn't the best player. Iguodala wasn't the best player. He got MVP. Stop that.
All right.
I guess, Ryan, that's a good insight into why inside the NBA is just so popular and very different from any other type of sports analyst show out there.
Yeah, it's been around 20 some years now, I think. And yeah, I mean, it was just groundbreaking when it started because, you just had this level of sort of casual banter, but again, guys clearly who care about the team and would get into these arguments that were never, they were never heated in the sense that you could tell these guys always did like each other still. But they would debate stuff like this and still do all the time. They added Shaquille O'Neal, I don't know if it's been 5, 6, 7 years now. And I think it kind of took Shaq a little while to work himself in with Kenny and Charles. But yeah, it's kind of iconic here for basketball fans of certainly the past couple of generations now. And Charles is a huge part of that. His personality there's not really anybody else quite like him out there.
Yeah, and his relationship with Shaquille O'Neal, a pretty big part of it as well.
Yeah, they have great rapport. And again, there they were agreeing. Shaq, I agree with Chuck. I can't do his voice, but it's deeper than I can go. But also they'll disagree with stuff, and Barkley will get piled up on sometimes by Kenny Smith, his longtime co-host, or also Shaq, because he never won a championship. So sometimes that'll be the way to end an argument is by pointing out to Charles, well, you never won a ring. So, but yeah, they just have an incredible amount of fun, and I've had colleagues and friends who've been a part of the production team in the past, and it's really a great show, and it comes through the way it does. Because all those guys like each other and love what they're doing. And again, it's great money, and it's just kind of a chance to talk about this thing that they care about and pay a lot of attention to. And so maybe that's the translation for Barkley with LIV Golf is that he loves golf. He admittedly not very good at it, but still loves to play and is into it. And if the money's great and he can talk about a thing he likes to talk about, then yeah, like I said, I won't be surprised if he makes that jump, and if it might, relatively speaking, work.
Right, yeah, that's interesting as to would it work, and would it work for him? Obviously, financially, it clearly would, because LIV are just paying astronomical amounts of money for whatever talent they want. But in terms of his ego, it's hard to imagine him ever getting the love from the golfing community that he gets from the basketball community.
Oh, I can't imagine, and that's, there's sort of the surface level of that, right, of that, he's not a former pro golfer, and in fact, the average, golf, the average sort of random American who golfs a lot is probably a much better golfer than Barkley. So yeah, they're probably not going to take his golf expertise all that seriously. But for the entertainment factor, I think that's where it has a chance to work. There's also the dynamic, that basketball, because it's always been or for decades, certainly it's been a predominantly black sport and has a very close black cultural tie-in. Golf is very much not that, of course, in the U.S. And you see much more of, I think, a racial divide when it comes to golf coverage and who the average golf fan is. So how his just being himself will go over with that crowd, I'll be interested to see.
As you say, golf isn't your sport, but I'm interested to get your sort of take then removed from LIV Golf as to how America is responding to it, because in this part of the world, well, we went from 6 months ago thinking this thing will never happen, particularly after Phil Mickelson's initial comments about the Saudi Arabians behind this, and we thought it was dead in the water, and it's quickly built momentum that we're now 3 events into this, that Bryson DeChambeau, Brooks Koepka, Dustin Johnson, far greater quality of players than anyone expected. And 3 months ago, all we were talking about was the human rights angle here, that Saudi Arabia, morally, should these players be taking the money? And I've noticed even in our golf coverage now, it's, well, what damage is this doing to the European Tour? Henrik Stenson stepping down as Ryder Cup captain, and it's more the fractures within golf than what it means for human rights. It feels from the outside that in America it's going the opposite way, that actually more and more questions have been asked about Saudi Arabian involvement and the 9/11 links and the human rights aspect. Or am I overstating that?
I think you're probably overstating it in the sense. My impression is that, I think there's a couple levels to it, right? But the U.S. is, we as a country, as a culture, have probably really never taken the Saudi Arabia September 11th thing, seriously. They're still considered an ally, right? And not a country that we've bombed or invaded, while others, there are plenty of others we have. I think, some of it too has to do, like we were talking about a minute ago, the average golf fan among other things, is probably relatively well off because it's an expensive sport, obviously, to play on a regular basis. And you get into demographics and political leanings and things like that. The average golf fan in the U.S. is probably ultimately going to be like, yeah, well, yeah, you know, I guess these guys aren't great, but hey, these are the best golfers I'm going to watch. You know, the greenwashing thing works because the people with the money, I think, understand that if you spend enough of it and get the compelling people on board, you know, the average, you know, fan is probably going to still tune in. I'm an Everton fan, sadly, as some of the other guys in the show know. But, you know, certainly as someone who follows English soccer closely, you know, the examples of teams that are owned, you know, full or in part by people with connections, you know, to really bad sources of money or politics or both, you know, it seems like it's much of the Premier League now. And that's obviously a lot of the teams that do really well. And, you know, as a fan, you sort of decide, okay, well, this is my team. This is my sport I'm going to watch. So I think the Saudis know what they're doing probably on this. And I don't think I doubt that the, you know, the sort of sources of the money and the unsavory aspects of how this has come about, I doubt they'll get in the way of its success here, certainly, as long as they've got a lot of the best golfers.
You'd be glad to know Everton signed Dwight McNeil today, so things are looking up.
I'm very, very excited about Dwight McNeil.
Really?
I just need to go look up some clips to see how he plays.
Yeah. So today may well be D-Day for Barkley because he says, I'm going to give them a deadline now when he's talking about Greg Norman, who's running LIV Golf. The deadline's going to be Thursday. I'm not going to keep TNT in limbo, to be honest with you. I don't think it's fair to them. Talking about the money on offer, so, you know, as we mentioned, 200 million reported for Phil Mickelson, 150 million for Bryson DeChambeau. He said, if they offer me something crazy, I'm going to take it too. Put to him that maybe he might sign for 3 times his hypothetical 20 million in annual income. If they triple it, next time on your show, the first question better be, Charles, where are we celebrating that tonight? That should be your first question if they triple what I'm making now. So if they were to offer him 60 million a year, is he that popular that you think he would bring a different audience to golf? Would he bring an audience with him?
I think there'd be some novelty follow, sure. I think there'd be a curiosity. There'd be a sense of, you know, is he going to fall on his face? Is he going to be ridiculous? Is he maybe going to sort of be a breath of fresh air who will make it watchable for people who otherwise haven't watched it? I think there'll be some of that. You know, they've also, TNT, Turner, the network, has used him for college basketball coverage in recent years during the NCAA college tournament, which is a huge thing here every spring. He's ended up doing a number of those games as well. Which was a relatively new thing for him in his career. And so that speaks to his popularity among, you know, basketball fans and sort of the average U.S. sports fan. And golf, again, it's tricky. Like I said, very different audience, very different consumer of the sport. And so I think it is a bit of a, you know, again, it's a risk for people who can afford a risk, I guess, right? They know if they throw a bunch of money at them, it doesn't work out, that they'll write that loss off pretty quickly, I'm sure. But yeah, I think he's got the potential, at least initially, to broaden the audience and get people to pay attention who maybe hadn't before.
And what about the flip side then? You know, you mentioned that, you know, Saudi Arabia is still an ally of the US. Joe Biden visited Mohammed bin Salman last week and there was a fist pump and all of that. But we have seen some incredibly awkward press conferences around LIV, particularly with Phil Mickelson, when the 9/11 links are put to him and none of them really have an answer. Like, is there a backlash against the players? Is there likely to be a backlash?
My guess is not a meaningful enough one. Again, based on who the average golf consumer is and the level of engagement of a lot of folks with political stuff like that. And again, if you love golf, if you want to see the best golfers in the world, and most all of them end up on that tour, I think you're still going to watch it. You know, the PGA Tour is hardly a historic bastion of integrity either, right? I mean, there's lots of examples of racism and misogyny up until, you know, pretty recently, and you know, and it's an elitist sport. It's, again, a lot of history of racism. It's awful for the environment. I mean, you know, even if you're a PGA fan, you gotta write a lot of that stuff off to you know, set it aside. I think, to follow the sport closely there. So I don't think it's that much of a stretch, in my opinion, for sort of the average, you know, avid PGA fan to think, well, yeah, it's ultimately just going to be the best pro golfers golfing for a different 3-letter organization. You know, how does that impact me in my life?
So away from Charles Barkley and what potentially might happen, and maybe we'll find out after this round with Dustin Johnson and Bryson DeChambeau and Donald Trump exactly what happens. In the offseason, the other big story is Kevin Durant. So the super team that was created at the Brooklyn Nets, James Harden's been traded to Philadelphia, and now Durant has requested a trade. What's going on here?
Just a mess as far as, again, three guys I talented: Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, James Harden. Harden obviously was already gone last year. Kyrie Irving, I don't know how much of that has sort of made its way across the pond, but as far as a guy who is phenomenal talent, but, a bit of a head case, for lack of a better way to put it, he's just kind of all over the map.
So he was anti-vax and wasn't allowed play.
Right, and also, and the efforts for New Jersey, yeah, and the efforts he made to try to justify it have been pretty silly, frankly. James Harden, when he was there, and much of his career, there kind of been, or at least in recent years, kind of been questions about his commitment to conditioning and his attitude generally. Durant's just more of a sort of, and has been for years, this kind of enigmatic. Just a little bit of an odd character. I don't think there's ever been a question of his commitment to the teams he's been on. Certainly no question of his level of skill and ability. He's on his game offensively, at least. He's as good as any player maybe in NBA history. When he's his offensive game is clicking, he's pretty much unstoppable. But yeah, all these guys agreed to go to this situation where they're kind of three alpha players, and they thought they could make it work, side by side, and didn't. For a variety of reasons, none of which have really been Durant's fault, but he has had the injury issues. So yeah, it's, I think he obviously recognizes it's not a great position, or not a great situation to be in at this point, given that Harden's gone and Kyrie kind of continues to be a giant question mark. Where he'll end up and who's able to make a deal there, and given his age and given his mileage, there's no reason to think he shouldn't be able to play at a high level for at least another couple of years. A really high level. But again, that's assuming health. And I don't know. It's hard to say where he's going to land, if he may end up stuck there. But it is a mess. This whole idea of a super team era that LeBron, kind of instigated when he moved to Miami about 10 years ago, has worked well for him, and worked well when Durant went to Golden State, certainly with a championship caliber team that was already there, but has not worked out on a couple of other occasions. And I think, this Nets situation is kind of the prime example of, just because you bring together three future Hall of Famers does not mean it's the right mix. And the Nets have kind of personified the downside of that.
So where's Durant going to end up?
Oh, man, you're really going to make me give you an answer, huh? I don't know. I don't think he'll be a Laker. Let's put it that way. I don't think he'll be a Warrior. I really don't know. I mean, I would just be making, the blindest guess at this point. Boston, I don't know. They've talked about it. I think it would be a shame to give up on a team that made it, deep made it to the finals this year with a relatively young core. But maybe the Celtics see their window closing. I think Toronto, I've heard, sort of half serious references to the Raptors. I guess Boston's as good as anywhere, or as likely as anywhere, but I'm not at all sold on that. How's that for a hedge? Yeah,
that's fine. You can sit in the fence all day long. Ryan, great to talk to you as always.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.